The courtroom is quiet, but the air is tense. Everyone is waiting for the jury selection to begin. This is no ordinary case. It's high profile, attracting attention from all around the city. The judge walks in calm and composed, as everyone stands up in respect. The lawyer, a man with a reputation for being sharp and ruthless, takes his place at the front. He's already scanning the room, sizing up the potential jurors. One man catches his eye, a black juror. The lawyer's expression shifts slightly. He doesn't show it outwardly, but he's not comfortable with the idea of this man on the jury. As the judge begins the process of selecting jurors, the lawyer starts to make his notes, already preparing his strategy. But his mind isn't fully on the case. Instead, it's focused on the one juror he wants to get rid of. The black man is seated calmly, waiting his turn. He doesn't seem to notice the lawyer's discomfort, but the lawyer makes no attempt to hide his disdain. He watches carefully, waiting for the right moment to act. The scene is set, the tension is building, and we can already tell that this isn't going to be a simple selection process. The lawyer leans forward slightly, studying the black juror. He doesn't know much about him yet, but it's clear that this man doesn't fit the lawyer's idea of a fair juror. With a cold, calculating expression, the lawyer begins to quietly voice his concerns to the judge. He seems like the type who might let his personal feelings get in the way of making an impartial decision, the lawyer says, trying to sound reasonable. He's speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, but his words are carefully chosen. The judge looks at him, unmoved. "What makes you say that?" he asks. The lawyer smiles, a thin, almost smug grin. "Well, just look at his background," he suggests. "A man from a community that's been wronged by the system. He might hold a grudge." The judge raises an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting that because of his race, he's incapable of being impartial?" he asks, his voice calm but firm. The lawyer hesitates for a moment but then continues, his tone a little more aggressive. "Not because of his race. Well, not entirely. But with everything going on in the world, how could he not bring his experiences into the deliberations? He might have a bias against my client." The judge gives him a long look, as if weighing his words. The lawyer, now more confident, takes his chance. "I believe he should be excluded," he says, his voice low but certain. The judge doesn't immediately respond. He simply glances at the juror, then back at the lawyer. There's a moment of silence. The lawyer is certain he's going to get his way. But the judge isn't done yet. The judge leans back in his chair, his hands folded neatly on the bench. He's been quiet, listening intently to the lawyer's words. But now he speaks, his voice calm yet stern. "You believe this juror should be dismissed simply because of his background?" the judge asks, looking directly at the lawyer. The lawyer nods confidently, a slight smirk on his face. "Exactly. His experiences could cloud his judgment. It's not just about race, it's about bias. I'm just looking out for fairness." The judge doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he turns his gaze toward the juror, who remains composed, unaware of the conversation happening in the background. Then, the judge shifts his attention back to the lawyer. "I'm hearing you say that because someone comes from a particular background or community, they cannot be objective." The judge's tone is now more direct, challenging the lawyer's reasoning. The lawyer's expression falters for just a second, but he quickly recovers. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in a case like this, with emotions running high, certain perspectives could affect their judgment." The judge slowly shakes his head, his voice now firmer. "You're implying that this juror's life experiences make him incapable of serving as a fair and unbiased juror, but you haven't provided any evidence of that. What you're asking for is an assumption based on his race and background." The lawyer opens his mouth to speak, but the judge raises his hand, silencing him. "You're entitled to your opinion," the judge continues, his eyes piercing. "But in this courtroom, we don't make decisions based on assumptions. We make decisions based on facts." The lawyer looks down, realizing that the judge isn't backing down. The room feels heavier now, as the judge prepares to make his next move. The lawyer's frustration is starting to show. His confident demeanor is slipping, and the more the judge speaks, the more his impatience grows. He leans forward, his eyes narrowing. "Your Honor," the lawyer begins, his voice rising a little. "We're talking about fairness here. This is a serious case. Can we really afford to have someone with a potential bias on the jury? The judge stays calm, maintaining his steady gaze. I've heard your argument, but I don't see any legitimate reason to dismiss this juror. His background doesn't automatically make him biased. The lawyer's hand tightens around the papers in front of him. You don't understand. I'm trying to protect the integrity of this trial. We can't let personal experiences cloud someone's judgment, especially in a case this important. The judge's brow furrows slightly, but his voice remains measured. It sounds like you're assuming that anyone with a certain background is inherently biased. That's not the standard we uphold in this courtroom. The lawyer's tone sharpens. I'm not assuming anything, I'm just being realistic. There are things at play here that you're not considering. The judge leans forward, his eyes locking with the lawyer's. And what exactly are those things? He asks, his voice calm but cutting through the lawyer's bluster. The lawyer hesitates, then quickly speaks again, trying to regain control of the situation. I'm talking about the broader issues, the societal context. The juror might not even realize the influence his own experiences have on his perspective. The judge doesn't flinch. That's a very broad argument with no real foundation, and you still haven't provided a reason why this juror should be excluded. The lawyer is visibly tense now, his frustration turning to desperation. He's pushing harder now, but he knows the judge isn't budging. The judge pauses, giving the lawyer a long, deliberate look. For a moment, the room is silent, the tension thick in the air. The lawyer, still standing, tries to maintain his composure, but it's clear his confidence is starting to crack. Finally, the judge speaks, his voice softer but firm. Let me be clear, he says, looking directly at the lawyer. What you're asking for isn't about fairness, it's about prejudice. You're using assumptions based on race to try to exclude someone from this jury. The lawyer's face flushes, and he opens his mouth to argue, but the judge cuts him off. This isn't about protecting the integrity of the trial. This is about you trying to stack the jury in your favor, and it's wrong. The courtroom goes still as the judge's words hang in the air. The black juror, who had been quietly observing the exchange, looks down for a moment, trying to avoid attention. The judge leans forward slightly, speaking with more conviction now. You don't get to decide who is fair and who isn't, based on their race or background. This isn't the way the law works, and it's not how it should ever work. The lawyer looks down, unable to respond at first. The weight of the judge's words is sinking in. It's clear now that this isn't just a legal argument. It's a moral one. The lawyer begins to realize that his actions, no matter how justified he thought they were, are rooted in something much darker: prejudice. The judge continues, his voice steady but filled with authority. In this courtroom, everyone is equal, and that includes this juror. His background doesn't make him any less capable of doing his duty. The lawyer shifts uncomfortably, knowing that the judge is right. His hands are shaking slightly as he looks down at his notes, trying to collect himself. The judge leans back in his chair, looking at the lawyer with a calm, unwavering expression. He knows this moment is crucial, not just for the case, but for teaching a lesson that extends beyond the courtroom. You've made a grave mistake, the judge begins, his voice carrying weight. In this room, and in every courtroom, the law is supposed to be a place of fairness, a place where everyone, no matter their background, is given a chance to be heard. The lawyer remains silent, his face reddening as the judge continues. The problem with what you're doing, Mr. Crawford, is that you're allowing your own prejudices to guide you, the judge says, his voice firm. You're assuming that because of the juror's race and background, he cannot be impartial, but that's not how justice works. The lawyer swallows hard, his eyes focused on the floor. The judge's words are hitting harder than he expected. Bias isn't just about race. It's about perspective, and everyone has a different perspective. This juror's background doesn't make him less capable of understanding the facts and applying the law. If anything, his perspective can bring an important layer of understanding that someone else might miss, the judge adds, his voice softening just slightly. The lawyer looks up now, meeting the judge's gaze, but his expression is conflicted. The weight of what he's hearing is beginning to sink in, though it's clear he still doesn't fully want to accept it. The judge doesn't let up. You're in a position of power, Mr. Crawford. Your words and actions matter. They set an example for the people who watch this trial, for the people who trust the justice system. And when you use your position to push for bias, you're undermining everything this system stands for. The lawyer's face tightens. He knows the judge is right, but he's also starting to feel a sense of humility he's not used to. The lesson has been delivered, and it's clear. The lawyer has much to learn about fairness and integrity. The judge's words hang in the air, filling the courtroom with an uneasy silence. The lawyer's hands tremble slightly as he stands there, the weight of the lesson sinking in deeper. He knows he's been called out, not just for his actions in the case, but for something bigger. A flaw in his character he hadn't fully seen until now. The judge breaks the silence, his tone calm but resolute. "I'm going to make my ruling now," he says, turning to the jury panel. This juror remains. He will not be excluded based on assumptions or prejudice. He is fully capable of serving on this jury. The black juror, who had been quietly waiting in the back, looks up in surprise. He meets the judge's eyes, nodding slightly, though his expression remains composed. It's a small moment, but it speaks volumes. He knows this is not just about him, but about justice for everyone. The lawyer standing a few feet away is still processing the judge's words. He doesn't argue. He doesn't challenge the decision. He simply nods, defeated. His earlier arrogance is gone, replaced with a reluctant understanding that the judge has outmaneuvered him, not just in the courtroom, but in his values. The judge's voice is firm as he looks around the courtroom. Prejudice has no place in this trial. It has no place in any trial. We are here to seek the truth, and we can only do that when we allow every person, regardless of their race or background, a fair chance to participate. With that, the judge turns back to the case. The atmosphere in the room shifts. The lawyer's discomfort is palpable, but he remains silent. The trial moves forward, with the black juror still seated among the others, ready to do his duty. The trial continues, but the weight of what just happened lingers in the room. The lawyer, once so sure of himself, now seems distracted. His posture is less confident, his focus scattered. He looks at the black juror, who remains calm and composed, ready to do his duty, unaffected by the tension that had unfolded. As the case progresses, it's clear the lawyer has been humbled. He no longer tries to manipulate the jury or influence decisions in the way he did before. His attempts to control the situation have faded, replaced by a quiet acknowledgement of his own shortcomings. The judge keeps a steady presence throughout the rest of the trial, his earlier lesson echoing in the lawyer's mind. Though the trial continues, it's not just the case that's being decided, it's the lawyer's own conscience. In the final moments of the trial, the camera subtly shifts to focus on the lawyer's face. There's a look of reflection in his eyes, a recognition of the lesson he's learned, even if he hasn't fully come to terms with it yet. The juror sits there, steady and unwavering, knowing that the true victory here isn't just about the trial, but about standing up for fairness. The case moves forward, but the lessons of the courtroom will linger far longer.